and welcome to all of you this afternoon for our webinar. Today we're trying to focus, and we want to focus very much on recovery and recovery planning and how we are recovering, particularly in the visitor economy. We know it has been hardest hit, and I'm delighted to welcome, as Alvaro has already indicated, Kate Nicholls, who's CEO of UK Hospitality. Kate, you've been doing sterling work across the UK on behalf of everybody within the visitor economy. And for us in Liverpool, as you know, it was only in February when we met actually face to face. It seems like a whole age ago, doesn't it, from that day that when you came up to Liverpool and spent quite a bit of time with us. The world has changed. How has the world changed for you, apart from the fact that you're now spending most of your time on Zoom conferences or Twitter? I know your Twitter following has increased incredibly, and thank you for all you do on that. So Kate, from a UK perspective, we know we get slightly frustrated with government announcements that don't give us sufficient time to plan. How do you see the situation at this moment in time?
Well, thank you very much for having me back again. And yes, it does seem a lifetime ago since the last time I was up and we were talking about Brexit, food supply, immigration, and I think we probably touched on COVID because it was starting to affect our industry from back then. Certainly down in the London hospitality market, they were seeing the effects from the end of January, beginning of February. So I do feel as though I've been talking COVID-19 for most of this year. And I think that's really helpful because we've been able to make sure hospitality was front and centre with the government from January, February. It stood us in really good stead that they made sure we had the support that we needed. And actually turning to your specific question about the national state that we're in, bit of a pivotal day, bit of a pivotal week. We are going to be hearing from Boris Johnson, we think, today about further changes in the lockdown, because that's the date that we've got for reviewing legislation, hopefully moving comprehensively into phase 2 and signalling hopefully that we will have that move into phase 3. And then we also have discussions from the government later this week about changes in furlough, which are obviously critical for our planning. I think the advantage that we've got when you look at that roadmap, the signal that hospitality is going to be towards the end of that process from the 4th of July does mean that I think of all sectors, we are going to have the most time to plan and we're going to have the most notice, I think, of what is likely to come out. Because government has sort of got its head around some of the early stage steps that they needed, the difficult things to do with public transport and schools and what people can do outside their home. They've got some of the economy back moving. They know what they're doing about COVID secure workplaces. And therefore, I think that we will get, uniquely as a sector, 3 to 4 weeks notice of what guidelines we're going to be operating under. As we move into June and the discussions that are ongoing around those COVID secure workplaces, I think that's what we'll get. I think that's partly because our supply chains are so complicated and ministers know that we need to have that notice to step up those supply chains, but also critically because our visitors and our consumers who are coming back need to book. So it's not quite the same as deciding you're going to go back to a supermarket tomorrow or go to the carpet shop on the 15th of June when it reopens, or even go and buy a new car. For our customers, our consumers, they need to book. So government needs to be communicating that they can do that with confidence, and therefore they need to give us due notice.
Thanks, Kate. Paul, from a local perspective, you're planning at this moment in time how you can open your restaurant. We know that at this moment in time, we are told that 2 metre is the social distancing that we need to play with. How is that impacting on what you're doing locally, Paul?
Well, I think, yeah, well, good afternoon, everybody, and great to have Kate with us. I think we would all agree that this 2 metre rule is the single most critical point that we're all trying to get our heads around at the moment. We appear to be, if not one of the only countries in the world who are sticking to the 2 metre rule at the moment, which is a constant source of frustration to all of us. And I think, you know, if you look at the image behind me there of the art school tables laid out, which is a little ironic today, seeing as we're about to talk about this 2 metre thing, I've had to remove half of those tables, which of course, therefore, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to realise that the 50% revenue that follows, if you're lucky, if everybody comes out with the customer confidence that Kate alluded to, it puts extreme pressure on. And I think, quite rightly, whether you're in Liverpool or in London or Glasgow, these are the same problems that we're all going to be facing. And part of that, obviously, as you know from the announcement this week, Joe Anderson, our mayor, has been able to help us try and restore some of our covers by taking it outside. We all know now that the virus is less sort of picked up through interaction outdoors, and try and turn our streets and city centre into a more European cafe style, dining out. Obviously, we have the great British weather to contend with, but at the end of the day, this is a great move, because it means that somebody like me, and there are thousands of them in Liverpool alone, who are going to lose half their attendance inside, can take that outside. Now, if all of a sudden we get that reduced to 1.5 meters or 1 meter, clearly that takes a lot of pressure off all of us. But I think it would still be a great step for the city to make, because I think our long-term view of the city is that dining out scene continuing to develop, continuing to become a little more European and more diverse, and to come out into Castle Street, Bold Street, Hope Street, Lark Lane, wherever we look to do that. I think it was such a welcome announcement by Joe this week, and I'm really looking forward to working with the bid company, the Chamber, and also obviously Liverpool Hospitality to deliver that. So I think it's the first time we've had a little bit of excitement and some chance to think creatively again for a while, and that's what we are in our industry. We need something that sort of excites us and gets us back talking about what ingredients, what menus, what wine lists, what beers, and start looking after people again, because we're all desperate for that, So that's how I see it. Me, ever the optimist still.
Okay, just coming back to you on the national perspective, obviously you speak to ministers on a regular basis on behalf of the hospitality sector. Are they listening to you? Do they understand the impact that a 2 meter social distance has on a restaurant, or has on a cafe in Bold Street, or the inability of a pub to open up?
Yes, I do think they're listening. It's a strong message they're getting from everybody, that this is not just about the volume of premises we can reopen. This is about the viability of premises when they do start to trade, and the amount of support we're going to need from the Chancellor and from the Exchequer going forward if they maintain that social distancing. So there is quite a strong lobby. It's come up every single meeting I've had over the last 2 to 3 weeks when we start talking about reopening, is the restriction that 2 meter rule imposes. I take heart from the fact that the Prime Minister's roadmap does talk about relaxation, and particularly when he went before the liaison committee yesterday, he gave 2 commitments that I think can give hospitality a great deal of heart, and tourism more generally. One is he committed to get the scientific advisory group on emergencies to look again at the risks, and to look again at social distancing and see whether that could be reduced. And they will report before the 15th of June, which should give us quite a lot of heart if we're looking at planning our reopening. And we've made clear that the difference is if you've got 2 meters, it isn't an absolute. Government has accepted that. It isn't an absolute. It is only for workspaces, and you can relax it if you've got side-by-side working for chefs, for example. But I think if we can reduce it, it's the difference between opening at 30% of normal revenues and 60% of normal revenues. And that is sort of a matter of life and death for many of our SMEs and many of the fantastically diverse independent restaurants that we've got. And we are blessed in Great Britain that we have a variety of very historic buildings, some of which are behind some of the panelists, and I feel very bad that I've got a blank wall. But they are unique. Our historic buildings are unique, and we should be celebrating that. But it does mean it's very difficult for social distancing. No other country has 2 meters. Most of our international comparators and competitors have reopened successfully with 1.5 or 1 meter. And it would be great if we could have a commitment to review the evidence, publish the evidence, keep it under review on a 3-weekly basis if they do conclude to stick at 2 meters, and then look at giving us a roadmap for reducing that so we can be more profitable. I think the fact that Boris Johnson said that to the liaison committee yesterday is a sign that they're listening. And the other thing he did say was he recognised how difficult it was for hospitality being closed. He recognised how important economically, socially, but more importantly, culturally, and therefore we need support to get restarted. And he did say, having reviewed the evidence, he thought we could go faster and further than he had originally thought when he set out the roadmap a couple of weeks ago. So I'm quite optimistic, having been pessimistic when I heard Michael Gove say it was a long time before anybody could prop up the bar. I was optimistic yesterday that the Prime Minister gave those very clear commitments in front of a select committee. And it might be a minor point, but when they do things in front of select committees, their words have weight and their words have consequences, so we can hold them to that.
Excellent. So we hope that we will get that news very quickly, as obviously as part of the planning that we're doing at this moment in time across the city and across, so from an individual restaurant point of view, but also right across the city, because it's very important for us to do that.
Absolutely.
That's clearly something that we can take heart from that. So thanks for that. There have been, we know about the fact that our sector will need long-term support. And we're very thankful of the furlough. We've touched on the furloughing scheme that has been a marvellous scheme to come into place so quickly, but we know that we need that extending, and we'll need it tapering off, particularly for some long term, because Liverpool's visitor economy has blossomed over the last 10 years since our capital culture. And we know that the visitor economy in the city region is £4.9 billion. Much of that comes from international tourism and from our cruise industry. We were one of the shining stars in the UK cruise industry, particularly with our cruise terminal coming. What's your thoughts on international tourism and how we can start to get that back?
Well, I think that is obviously going to be longer and slower, and some of it is within the UK government's control and some of it isn't. Clearly, there's going to be variable travel restrictions that are on what visitors can do and what they can't do when they're travelling from their home countries, which will inhibit. But I'm really concerned about the proposals on quarantine coming in from the 8th of June, requiring people to have 2 weeks quarantine if they're coming to the UK from whatever destination. So I guess unless your cruise ships are coming via Dublin, there may be problems there in attracting visitors back and allowing that quarantine to take place. Again, it's very like the 2 metre social distancing. Understand the government is doing it. It needs to be temporary, it needs to be time limited, and it needs to be removed as quickly as possible. Because if it's not, it's going to do long-term damage, because international visitors will be deterred from booking to come to the UK if they know they've got a 14-day quarantine period. And I think what we also need to be careful about is that our international competitors don't steal a march on us. We're not very good in this country at allocating the right amount of government funds to promote international tourism, which is, after all, an export earner. And other countries are ramping up the amount they're spending. Japan, Italy, Germany, they're all increasing the spend to attract international visitors. We're not, and at the same time, we're putting in controls to restrict and deter people. And other countries as well are offering incentives. So Sicily is going to pay half of your airfares if you fly to Sicily over the summer. And there's also incentives around accommodation providers. In Italy, France, Vienna, they're all offering restaurant vouchers. So I think there's more that we could do to attract day trippers and domestic, but also to get the message out there that we're not closed to international visitors. It sends the wrong message having a quarantine period, in my view.
Yes. And what are we doing about lobbying against that?
Well, we're working quite collectively across a wide group of other business organisations, because business is united almost in opposing it. So working with the airlines, the airport operators, the cruise operators, ABTA as a travel, and CBI more generally. I think the government is entrenched and has dug in that this will come into place on the 8th of June. We're lobbying to make sure that it comes off just as quickly as it was imposed and is on perhaps only as short as 3 weeks. But we do need to make sure it has that complementary message at the same time internationally that we're not a closed market.
Thanks, Kate. We talked about furloughing of staff, and that's one of the main costs for the visitor economy. But the other element of it was the furloughing of property, and there's been a move by BPF, BRC, and Revo around the furloughing of property. This idea that landlords still need paid rent because they've got banks and they're they would breach their banking covenants. From a hospitality sector, it's vital that all costs are considered, and this furloughing property would be one that would significantly benefit. I know Paul's been very active in this, haven't you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, we talk about the 2 metre rule being the most significant, but I have to say, you know, whatever the 2 metre or 1 metre, if this isn't resolved in terms of landlord-tenant arrangements, we are going to see colossal problems moving forward. And you know, I can only speak from my own experience and the members of the Liverpool Hospitality Group that we all represent. But you know, if the insurance companies had paid out as they should have done, in my opinion, then we wouldn't be talking about this, because we'd have all had the money to pay our rent, and the businesses that we represent would be comfortable and as it should be. But they didn't. And the problem we have is that landlords appear to think that this is only happening for the tenant and not for themselves. And in the spirit of what this is all about, this whole issue is we are in this together. And you know, we know that as furlough decreases, that there isn't going to be the same turnover. There isn't going to be the money to pay landlords. And the problem is we're being forced into borrowing. They want us to borrow money that, all right, yes, you get a 12-month holiday, but you're being forced basically to borrow money to pay the landlord. And then at some point you have to try and repay something that you've set your business up to probably not be able to pay, which is, of course, that's why the government's saying 80% backing and in the bounce back 100% backing. But the fact is we shouldn't have to be forced into borrowing to survive this, is my honest belief. Now, obviously, there's a valuation of property issue for the landlords, interest rates and so forth with the banks. Everybody has to play their part in this. But I think the furloughing of space, as you alluded to, Bill, whether you call it the national timeout or the furlough of space, all of these very worthy campaigns that are out there, they have to be addressed, because the next quarter of rent is due Monday onwards. And you know, I know people in our industry who haven't paid last quarter's yet. So this is a massive, massive problem. And I know Kate has been campaigning and lobbying like hell. And we need to continue that, because there isn't a resolution. And it seems that most landlords still believe that they should have 100% rent paid to them, whether it's deferred or not, which to me is unsustainable.
So, Kate, Rishi Sunak received the letter from BPF and colleagues. Have you feel there's any response to that?
I haven't seen any response coming back to that specific proposal. I know they're actively looking at rent, because as Paul rightly says, there's been so many voices commenting about this issue and saying that the government approach from March of this is not a matter for us, you need to sort it out amongst yourselves, is no longer tenable. Now this is going to cut across 2, perhaps 3 rent quarters, as we've got a very slow restart. So we know government have now accepted that they need to come in and help to manage this process. I haven't yet seen any cash sitting behind that to help resolve this issue. Government has said that they will look at brokering a solution or brokering a legal framework, but I think it needs to go much further. And as Paul touched on, you know, that there is this phrase about a timeout, and it's clear that nobody is going to be able to pay their rent in hospitality for the March quarter and the June quarter. So we do need to have a round table summit to get all sides together to work out how that is going to be dealt with. And we need a principle of sharing the pain. You know, the banks need to accept that they're not going to get a full return. The landlords need to accept they're not going to get full rent. And the lessees need to accept that they are going to have to pay their rent, a proportion of it, at some point in the future. So let's work on a solution that shares that pain and addresses it, rather than hampering the recovery, which will affect not just the businesses, but also the high streets, the town centres, the investment we can make in our communities, the ability to employ people. So it affects the whole of the town centre economy in Liverpool. If we don't get this right, it will hamper our recovery if that debt is hanging over our heads and we have to pay 3/4 of our rent costs in September. It's just not sustainable to do in one hit. Yeah. So government has to deal with this, especially as they are tapering and removing furlough, which is the one lifeline that many businesses in the sector are depending upon. Second biggest cost after that is rent.
Great. So government are listening to that, and we look forward, and we will keep pressure on through all the contacts that we have. And obviously, you know, I sit on the High Street Task Force with you, and we will definitely use the High Street Task Force as a vehicle to put that pressure on.
Yes, yes. And ideally, if we can get some pressure on the Chancellor to say, okay, furlough is going, but another way of supporting would be to put some money behind this to facilitate a resolution. That would be another route forward.
Thanks, Kate. We've got quite a few questions, and we'll come back to those. And Chris will be coming on in a few moments with our other panelists. Kate, I just wanted to say one thing. You've produced, and UK Hospitality has produced an excellent document about how the sector can start planning for recovery. Is that, I mean, you've produced that with a sort of one eye on what government are about to say? And
yes,
so
very definitely, because looking at what government have said in other sectors, the government guidelines are very top level, and it requires you as an individual business to do a health and safety risk assessment. So what we did, it was partly, if we got on the front foot, we could encourage government to reopen us more quickly, because we could say to them, here you go, here you are, this is what we're going to volunteer, so that we can demonstrate we're going to be safe. But also to help the businesses, and particularly the SMEs in the sector, to do their risk assessment. So that ideally will sit underneath the top level guidance that we get from government, and provide a menu of options for businesses to look at control measures they can volunteer. And crucially, it will be quite stringent control measures that they can volunteer, so they can justify dropping down from 2 meters. Because now the government has said 2 meters is not absolute, you've got other control measures, then we need to be able to volunteer those. So at the moment, that's just in discussion with our member companies. Once we get a signal from government as to the way that they're going and the approach they're going to take, we'll release that publicly, and it'll be publicly available to any hospitality business or tourism business, and it will go across hotels, accommodation providers, hostels, pubs, bars, restaurants, nightclubs, holiday parks, self-catering.
Excellent, thanks, Kate. So you would anticipate that by mid-late June?
Oh, our document should be ready in the next week to 10 days.
Excellent, that's great. Thanks for that, Kate. Great stuff. We have quite a number of questions, and we'll come back to those. But if I could just hand across to Chris, we're on time. And then we'll allow more time for questions at the end. Thanks for that. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Paul.
Great, thanks, Bill. And that was great, Kate. Some really good insights there. I think if we can achieve those 2 goals of, one, getting government to understand the need for continued business support well beyond furlough, and if we can get them to finally put some serious money behind the sector in order to drive it forward. And when you see figures like £18 billion going into France to fundamentally stimulate its economy, you see Vienna putting a €50 voucher, restaurant voucher, which I know Paul would like if that was the case, you know, going out. That's the sort of stuff that, if we're going to really take the sector seriously, that's what we need to start doing. But thanks for those, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions on that. This side of the panel, you know, following on from that very good panel, got an equally good group here with Claire McColgan, Garry Fortune, and Paul Beasley. And just before I start with you, Claire, just to give a bit of scene setting from the Liverpool perspective, I think one of the really encouraging things that have come out of a crisis, if good things can come out of a crisis in a way, has been the joint working that started to happen, particularly across the city centre, with a really conjoined approach between public and private sector, all working together for the greater good. And I think when the first phases of this come out through the health messaging, it will be brilliant to see all areas of the city using the same signage, the same messaging, and the same joined up approach. And I think that's going to really set us well going forward when we start being able to move from establishing confidence to then building demand. Yeah. But Claire, if I can bring you in first, there's a couple of points for you, Claire. I think one is how you see you know, the recovery planning move forward. You know, you've been in dialogue with others, with government, and just picking up some of the points that Kate meant, how you see the flavour of that moving forward, and also, you know, this kind of 2 metre, 1 metre, the impact on our brilliant theatres and our great cultural offer. where the ability for our cultural institutions to work within that space limit is really, you know, just unviable. How do you think they're adapting and beginning to position themselves forward to the reopening?
I'll be quite quick, I think, because I think everyone just wants to talk to Kate, because I was writing loads of stuff down when she was talking. It was so interesting. And Kate, just from me and from the city, really, thank you for all the work you're doing. It's been incredible, you know, hearing everything you're doing. It's great for the sector, but it's also great for cities like Liverpool, so thank you. Just to pick up a couple of things, we've been very practical in our response. So we've gathered together a group of tourism, people like Bill, people who are responsible for the city centre, just to kind of start moving on what recovery looks like. And we started that very early. And in some ways, because Liverpool is used to working collegiately, it's been quite an easy thing to do. And I think what's been brilliant about it is that joint working, kind of what Chris says, the fact that you will see the same messaging, whether you're in Liverpool Bid area or whether you're in Liverpool One or whether you're in the Albert Dock, people won't necessarily be able to see the difference. And that's really important because this is a public health issue, you know, it's a pandemic. So we need to make sure that we are giving the public really, really clear messaging and not confusing them with different kind of messaging. It's confusing enough as it is anyway. So that's really important. I think what we wanted to do was offer as much practical help as we can, because there's lots of conversations going on, but for the city we have to get those small businesses, especially those small independent businesses, up and running as soon as we can. And they must, I mean, Paul, we speak with Paul all the time, but what those businesses must be going through is just horrible, isn't it? I mean, it's their passion, they've grown up doing it, they've believed in it, they've started up, kids from school who've come together to kind of make great things happen, especially around the food industry in Liverpool, and then suddenly it's taken out from under them in the space of 3 days. So as a city, we wanted to make sure that we were practical in how we're doing it, which is where the kind of outdoor furniture kind of idea came from, that actually we can move capital money from somewhere from the city council, where we have a capital plan for 2 years, and we've just changed all that round so that we can actually provide practical help. And the High Streets Fund as well that government has released will also really help us. So 3 stages of the city centre really. The first one is practically getting it open, and we've got a group, it seems like it grows every day, but there's about 60 people on one of these Zoom calls, from the head of licensing through to the head of cleansing, through to people like Bill and Donna from Liverpool One, the Bid and Albert Dock, all talking about how we practically and safely open the city centre. The police are also on there as well. So that's about shutting roads, talking about vehicle mitigation, which is quite technical, but is also quite expensive. So can we do some clever things around that keep people safe, but also means we can shut off more of the city? Hugely practical. It's never happened before. So all those agencies in one virtual space has meant that we can move really, really quickly. And it's been absolutely fantastic the time people have given us that. Second stage, which we'll be moving on to shortly once we've got the city centre opened and it's working, and it will be, we've never done it before, have we? So I'm sure there'll be teething problems with it, but we'll get the city centre open. And then we have to look at how we re-engage with domestic tourism first of all. You know, once the restrictions are lowered and once it is safe to do so, we need to start thinking about how we bring people here to experience the city. And that will be kind of a big domestic tourism campaign. Liverpool is a fantastic place for a holiday, as we all know. We have beaches 15 minutes away on public transport. You know, it's a good place to attract those people that might not have tried the Liverpool experience before. So that's the next stage, and that's the kind of mid to short to mid-term stage. And then we're also looking at long-term plans for the city centre, so how we look at those things that will make people want to invest with us, make people want to come here, those bigger kind of 10-year plans. And that's all happened because people like the people you see in front of you and all of you that are watching are working in such collaboration. You know, no one can do this by themselves, nor should they. The cultural sector, and there'll be people who are watching this who are freelancers or have been really badly hit by this. But in all honesty, especially the theatres, be probably some of the last that will open. And not only is that bad for the fact that theatre is a wonderful thing to have, but also if you look at the restaurants, bars, hotels, the tourism economy, and the actual kind of regular day-to-day money that comes in through those theatres, the Philharmonic, those big organisations being open and at full capacity, that's going to hit really hard. So we're working with the Arts Council, we're working with government about how we can try to get our venues functioning as well as possible, and the cultural organisation have always worked very collegiately together, and they will too. We want to do lots of stuff outside, but but the big thing for us is to get that regular, weekday kind of uptake in those streets that will be quiet, really quiet, without a cultural sector operating as they do. There's a lot of talk about London at the moment. I'm picking up lots of things in the national press about the big London organisations. It has no less impact, to be really clear, on cities like Liverpool, because our cultural sector has been the rocket fuel, as Joe Anderson says, for regeneration for the past 15 years. We're very different than other core cities in the fact our economy is very heavily reliant on the visitor economy and the cultural infrastructure. So if there is a plea to government that I've got, Kate, and you're speaking to government a lot, it's the regions. It's not just about those big organisations in London. This is devastating for places like Liverpool that have relied on their huge success. I'll stop there. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Claire. That's yes. I mean, I think that is a similar argument, Kate, to one around the importance of the conference and events market and all the event production companies that sit within that. Government needs to look at this really from all the elements of the sector, not just the kind of main, the easy bits of it. Yeah. Garry, moving on to yourself now. Garry, you've been well associated with the city for many years, and we were highly looking forward to the opening of the Inside Meliá into Liverpool. One of what would have been another 13 or 14 or so hotels that would have been coming into the city, bringing another 2,500 beds into the city over the next couple of years. So, reflecting on some of the points there that Kate and Paul and Bill were talking about earlier, how has all this shaped your planning and the plans of Inside by Meliá to open it? Are you going to open on schedule? Are you looking at anything different about how you might, set out that hotel, bearing in mind what's happened so far? What's the kind of picture from Meliá on this?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, it's been a tough couple of months, really. Obviously as a brand, but also planning ahead, because things are changing daily. We're getting updates every single day from our contractors about ideas on how we can work, with regards to social media, with regards to social distancing, etc., etc. It's tough. In our Liverpool site, we had 270 contractors working every single day, and that's down to now between 25 and 50. So as you can imagine, that will put a delay in. We're looking now to open the hotel towards, or to get given the hotel, I should say, towards November time, which is tough because we've took a number of staff on already. I've got a gent already who's going to be running the hotel. He's been with us for a number of months now, and we've been speaking to people within the city from kind of February time, really, with a view to getting them on 3-4 months before we open. So that's hard. But there's very little we can do with that. It's the same with all construction, I suppose, in the city. You've got to think of health and guidelines and follow that. So yeah, there'll be a delay, but we're hoping not too long. We get emails all the time, as I say. They're looking at doing split shifts, or where they're coming in the morning, some coming at night, some working weekends, etc. So it's not all arriving at the same time. They've issues with lifts because the new hotel is a 17-story hotel with the big sky bar on the roof. So that's one huge lift going up to the top. So they've got problems with getting things up to the lift with the number of people that it takes to carry things up. So that's something that we're really struggling with. So as I say, it changes all the time. But the latest information we had possibly a week ago was that we'd now get the building early November. And even then, though, it's exciting for me starting with a big brand like Meliá, but opening new hotels is very exciting. But opening new hotels in a new kind of norm as such, a new world, is going to be scary. It's totally different. It's totally different, and that's the worry. And it's opening in a city where I've loved the fact that we've opened with we've worked in a city where we've thrived on the back of football and events and things like that. Where now it's all up in the air. We don't know how do we forecast? What do we say our first year's numbers are going to be like? Because, you know, we don't know what football's going to be like, or events, or anything anymore. So, you know, we were kind of boasting on the fact that we had quite big M&E space in Liverpool, and, you know, that's obviously going to be changed and restricted too. So things are changing. It's tough. You know, the number of staff that we wanted to bring in, that's probably going to change as well. You know, roles are going to change. We may cluster more as opposed to do more on individual sites. But, you know, scary times. But, you know, we will pull through it. You know, we as I think Paul said something on Twitter a few weeks ago, we are a resilient bunch of people, and we'll all pull through, and we'll all kind of help and support each other. But this new norm is a bit scary, because we all, I suppose, we love the fact we deal with customers and guests all the time, and we're in their kind of faces all the time, and like to boast and show off our properties, and things are going to be very different. So, you know, it's difficult, but yeah, we will open. There's no worry about that. It's just a case of when. So fingers crossed it's sooner rather than later, really.
Okay, that's great, Gary. And it'd be interesting, Kate, I don't know whether, you know, I know you've been a great advocate of, you know, changes in fiscal policy, maybe reductions in VAT and things that will stimulate markets that will help businesses that are already here, but also help businesses that are like Gary's that we want to encourage to come to the city and to open. Yeah, Paul, certainly you're never last but least, Paul. Yeah, you've been through it all, my friend, in terms of the, you know, pre-capital culture, since capital culture. You've built up a very successful independent tour guide business. You've offered a brilliant service there with you and your fellow guides. So how is all this shaking out for you? I mean, how do you see, and based on what you've heard today, and your own thoughts about the future of your own business?
Yeah, very difficult times. And for those people who don't know, just in a nutshell, there's around about 100 recognised qualified tourist guides in the Liverpool City region, most of whom, 98% of them are self-employed. So they're obviously going through a very difficult time at the moment. And just as we were hearing earlier about London, we started to see the severity of what was coming in late January, early February, because we have a lot of clients from the Far East traveling in with the inbound operators like Kuoni, Mickey Travel, Travcore and the like. And those started to get cancelled from the end of January and early February. So it's been very, very tough for us at the moment. But, you know, we would like to think we play a key role in the visitor economy. We meet face-to-face for no less than an hour and a half to 2 hours every time, about 1 million visitors a year. And we're not just telling them about the history of the city, we're recommending restaurants to them, we're telling them about attractions and encouraging them to go to attractions and the like. So it's a key role, but we recognize that it's going to be a while, because at the moment there are so many things against us. There's obviously the confidence of people to travel. At the moment there are hurdles in place, or there will be very shortly when the 14-day quarantine comes in for overseas or anyone traveling into the country. So we at the moment see initially our business coming from the local market. We have a lot of social interest groups in the Liverpool City region, and we hope that we can encourage them out and about. We do 3 types of tours. We do coach tours, walking tours, and private tours. And clearly the walking tours, there's an opportunity there because of social distancing measures, especially if it does reduce down from 2 meters to 1 meter. We can do that quite easily. Coach tours is going to be really difficult. We all heard the news last week of the Specialist Leisure Group with Shearings, National Holidays, Caledonian, all going to the wall. And they, for Liverpool, they are actually big customers. They brought a lot of people into the city, and staying people as well. People who are staying for 3, 4, 5 nights in the case of some of those companies. So the coach industry is struggling, and I wouldn't be surprised if other companies, national companies, disappeared really before the whole thing is over. One thing I would say, and I appreciate everything that the council is doing. I love the idea of the pavement cafes and things like that. And I know at the moment there's a lot of talk of cycle lanes and people walking and things like that. We have a lot of visitors in normal times, and we hope normal times are going to come back. We have a lot of visitors who travel into Liverpool by coach. More people come to Liverpool by coach than come by cruise line. It's a big part of the industry. And at the moment, we have a fabulous city when it comes to coach tours. And outside of London, I would say Liverpool is probably one of the easiest cities to see on a coach tour than any other city in the country, because of the way the city is laid out and the way it operates. And we, moving around the city from the pier head right up to the Georgian Quarter and out into the Beatles areas as well, we are constantly selling everybody's attractions. Now, if the knee-jerk reaction is that we need to close down and pedestrianize significant parts of the city centre, I would hope that that's done almost on a pop-up type basis, where when we need to open them up again, we can do that, because it would be a great shame for Liverpool, and it would change the offer that we can make to coach visitors coming into the city when they do come back, if we cannot move around the city in the way that we do at the moment. We've been working very closely with the council about the city centre movement strategy, and we know what's going on there, and we can cope with that. But if the closures get any more severe, then it will make Liverpool a difficult city to see by coach. And that would be a great shame, because one of the great benefits for Liverpool, the city centre, is that we can see so much of it by coach. But I have every confidence. As Chris said, I've been around for a long time. I became involved in the visitor industry back in 1982 when I became one of the very first Beatle guides in the city. And I have a great faith in this old adage that we have a team Liverpool, that we will all pull together and we'll all get through. But I really hope that we can juggle all the balls successfully. I hope that the image of Liverpool doesn't suffer. I know we've been hearing things about the Section 114 notice that could we have to issue that, and the message that would send out to people, certainly within the United Kingdom. But I really hope that we can make sure that all parts of the visitor economy can work together to make sure that when times get better, and they will get better, that we'll all be in a good state of health to take that forward. But at the moment, we're looking initially at local groups, what we can do with them in terms of walking tours, just to get our guides back out there, match fitness, as they say in the world of football, and then work slowly. But to be perfectly honest, in terms of some of the clients that we've seen, which we've developed over the years, coming back, if we're being absolutely truthful, we are looking at early next year before that comes, because a lot is cyclical. Over the last couple of months, we would have had a lot, and I mean an awful lot, of French, German and Spanish school groups coming and staying in the city region. Clearly they didn't come, and they're not going to come again until the same period next year at the very least, because of the cyclical nature of the school program. But every confidence that we're going to come right. What we do need to do, one final thing I will say, Chris, what we do need to do, and I know I've spoken to you and I've spoken to James Wood in your operation, one of the things we need to look at is people are not going to come initially in the same numbers that they did come initially. So what we've got to do, and I hate this phrase, but we've got to sweat the asset. We've got to make sure that every single person that does come, we maximize their movement around the city, we maximize their spend while they're in the city. And I think in the past, if we're being honest, the last couple of years, we've not been brilliant at doing that. We don't have tourist information centres at the key points of entry, the airport, the railway station, the Albert Dock, where a lot of the coaches go to. We need to address that, and we need to work together as clusters. I've mentioned this before, so we can actually make sure that every single person that comes is shattered by the time they leave and has spent every penny of their money by the time they leave as well.
Okay, Paul, listen, some great points there, and I think we'll pick some of those up with you. But certainly in terms of the pedestrianisation and the anything around that, it all will take into account the various markets that we attract to the city. So don't have any doubts about that. I'm conscious also that we want to make sure, Bill, we get through because I can see a lot of questions in there, and want to make sure we maximise your time with us, Kate, as much as anything. But thanks very much, Claire, Gary and Paul, for some great insights there. Thank you very much. Back to you, Bill. That's
great. Thanks, Chris. And if I can bring Kate in. So, Kate, we have one question which you're going to answer live, which is the question from Ben Williams at the ACC, which is about clearly some of the national initiatives around potentially reduction in VAT, but also that there's been an ongoing debate, and Liverpool have looked at this, and we've looked at prior to lockdown, we were looking at a way to do that locally. We discussed that in February. What are your thoughts on that? Do you want to come back and just answer Ben's point in particular?
Yes, I do think we need to be talking to the government about a stimulus package to incentivise consumers to come back out and spend, encourage people to have the confidence to book day trips, overnight stays, etc. We have included VAT cuts as part of that, as part of our Fare 4. So if you go on our website, we've got a Fare 4 hospitality, which is a 4-point plan for recovery and restart, and a VAT cut is in there. I've never thought a tourism tax is the right way to incentivise and encourage investment in tourist and cultural facilities. And I really don't think a tax on overnight visitors is the right way forward at this point in time, when we need to be doing everything we can to attract people back to our city centres and to give confidence to book. So it won't surprise you to learn that I don't think a hotel or a bed tax or a tourism tax is the right way to go at the moment. I think it would be entirely counterproductive when people are going to be competing for market share and to encourage customers back. But I do think we need to be working collectively together as culture, leisure, tourism, hospitality to make bids to our city mayors, to our regional assemblies where we've got them in place, to our local councillors, to make sure that we get that incentivisation to bring visitors back to our country. I'd rather see that money used to do similar to Vienna or Sicily to provide that incentive for people to come back out. And while we've got a limitation on international visitors coming in, what we really need to be doing is focusing on our domestic market and getting people who live in the suburbs to feel encouraged to come back and have a day trip and spend in the nighttime economy or on eating out in the city centres. I think we've got a hard enough job to do there. And certainly from all the forecasts, those city centre venues are going to struggle the most because there'll be an absence of domestic business travel and you won't see people coming back to their offices. So we really need to work hard to incentivise consumers, not put taxes on to deter them.
Thanks, Kate. We've got a question from Liam Jones, which is, how is the city and the bid going to boost consumer confidence so footfall comes back as soon as possible? Well, clearly this is the nub of the issue is, how do we get footfall back to a level that it was preceding? Where do we go from where footfall used to be in about, the average footfall in the city centre was well over 1.3 million per week in footfall. At the moment, we've just seen a 6% increase in footfall week on week, but we're operating that within an 85% year on year. So we've got now 30,000 a week coming into the city rather than 1.3 million in terms of footfall. But one of the things we need to know is that any increase in footfall is done in a measured way. It's done in a carefully managed way. It's done with the health message at the centre of it, so we don't see any further spikes. So for me as chief executive of the bid company, our job is about increasing footfall in the city centre. It's about animation and about getting people in. And actually what we're saying, and the message will be, only come in for specific reasons to come in and do it in a measured way. And the city is planning that, as Claire's talked about. We have the city recovery group. The city will see changes in terms of signage. There will be one-way systems. There will be messaging. There'll be queuing systems outside of shops. All of this will be coming out and hopefully launching from the 1st of June. So we will try and boost consumer confidence by reassurance, and by reassurance with a health message initially, because we also know that consumer sentiment is such that at this moment that it has been indicated that consumer confidence to come back into the visitor economy will be one of the areas that will take the most in terms of bringing people back. So that's what we're planning at this moment in time. Chris, there was a couple of questions, Peter Hooton, and also around Jack Stopforth around marketing and multi-agency campaigning, and Peter particularly about how we can maximise the Irish market. We know there isn't the 14-day quarantine from Ireland. So how are we maximising that?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, you know, just to reiterate, I think the domestic market is going to be our target area. I think some of the conversations we're having with Visit Britain, Visit England, we would like all of Ireland to be potentially connected into a domestic marketing opportunity. You know, a common language there. There's a common market there which you could tap into. That's a conversation we're having at the moment. Obviously, EasyJet announcing that they are going to fly into Belfast as part of their domestic routes is a big opportunity. So I think no doubt that we will definitely look to, maximise the opportunities that access to markets give us the best routes to do so. I think the whole thing about a multi-agency approach is, I think, absolutely right. We need to carry the same multi-agency approach that we've adopted, I think, through the early stages and the early phases. That approach needs to be maintained and retained right the way through this, I think, not just for the next couple of months or so, but I think hopefully that will be something that will stay permanent going forward as an approach to this. So we're definitely doing a lot of work behind the scenes on that at the moment. Some of it has got to be judged by what product is going to be open, what product is going to be available, what they will come out of in the recovery phase, coming out of survival. We've got to have a look at all of that as well. But yes, we're sort of got everything geared really to be able to implement the demand phases of our recovery, but clearly aligned to making sure that the health narrative is giving us the opportunity to do that effectively. And that I think will be, we build a confident and safe city to come and enjoy. That I think will be the stimulus for demand. And there's a lot of pent up businesses out there ready to take that demand, but we just need to get the balance right.
Thanks, Chris. I know, Kate, you have to leave us in a few moments. So can I say a big thank you on behalf of all in the visitor economy in Liverpool for not only just joining us today and sharing the national perspective, but for all the work that you do on our behalf nationally. May you be strengthened in all that you do, and anything we can do, indeed, to support you, just ask the question. We are right behind you, four square.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I am sorry to have to dip off early, but it is in a good cause. I am jumping on a call with the business secretary to press the case for hospitality and tourism. So I will take everything that you've said and use that to reinforce the messages to government. And I'll share with you our member survey that's asking about the impact of some of the measures, which will help us in our lobbying going forward. So any of the businesses on the call that can reply and let us know how what social distancing will do and the implications for their business will be hugely beneficial. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Kate.
Seeing you again shortly. Thanks. Bye now. So thanks for that. It was good to have Kate on board with that national perspective. So we just wanted to pick up for a few minutes. I know we said we'll finish at 1 and we're not far away, but just I think it's worth spending a couple of minutes talking about our recovery planning, and particularly for retail initially. With retail, we know opening from the 15th. We're planning at the moment to get the city centre ready by, as I say, well, one of the things that's been done in the city centre, Liverpool City Council's new cleaning machine has been out cleaning Church Street and also other areas. So it's looking sparkling. I was in on Friday. I'll be back in again on a more regular basis from next week in the city centre. It's about getting our businesses ready for that. And we know that it's also about a measured and a balanced approach to reopening. This isn't some sudden rush when all will be open, because we know businesses need to balance between income and expenditure. And until we can guarantee some significant increases in income, it will be a slow approach to it. Chris, have you got anything else to add? Are there any more questions that we haven't responded to?
No, I think just a couple of quick points. I think on the, I think when we start to get the messaging out from next week on the health agenda, it would be great if businesses can help the amplification of that messaging, to trying to build that up so that people coming into the city centre know what they're in. This is kind of very much about a respect, patient, and be polite to others. I think as we begin to move forward from that, I think the initiative that the great initiative the Mayor came out with on Tuesday about walls, I know Claire wants us to move on that very quickly and get the criteria sorted out quickly. So I think the intention is that scheme and the availability and the criteria for it will be done as soon as we possibly can, but certainly within the next 7 to 10 days, so that there are opportunities for businesses to take advantage of that and to have it implemented and ready by the time that hopefully the sector comes back on the 4th of July. And that's important to get that delivery bit right.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And just picking Paul's point up about coaches and transport and in the city centre, this is an opportunity for us to be bold and imaginative in how we transform our city centre moving forward. So Paul and I will have more conversations about Castle Street in particular. That European piazza that will appear suddenly in front of the town hall. But we'll have those conversations. That's great. Thanks, everybody.